Thanks. Welcome to this informal virtual meeting of Babergh District Council Cabinet. I'm Councillor John Ward, leader of Babergh District Council, and I'll be chairing this meeting today. The decision to hold an informal meeting has been taken as a result of the current risks relating to the COVID-19 pandemic. As this meeting is now an informal meeting, the Cabinet will not be able to make decisions, and therefore there will be no voting on any items on the agenda. Members are asked to discuss the items on the agenda and to confirm a steer for each item, which will be recorded, and decisions may then be taken by officers or the leader under delegation, depending on the decision. May I remind you of some domestic arrangements? Please ensure that microphones are turned off when not in use. Please do not interrupt other speakers. If you are attending the meeting to speak and persistently interrupt the meeting, you may be asked to leave. Please remember to use the chat function only to indicate that you wish to speak and not to post comments or questions. Please note the messages in the chat panel can be viewed by people watching the live broadcast. I would like to remind everyone present that this informal meeting will be broadcast live to the internet and will be capable of repeated viewing. The whole of the meeting will be filmed, except where there are confidential or exempt items. If you make a representation to the meeting, you will be deemed by the council to have consented to being filmed. By entering this meeting as a speaker, you are also consenting to being recorded by the council and to the possible use of those images and sound recordings for webcasting and/or training purposes. The council, members of the public and the press may record, film, photograph or broadcast this meeting when the public and the press are not lawfully excluded. I'll now ask the Governance Officer to carry out the introductions.
Thank you, Chair. Present today are Councillor Mary McLaren, Chair of the Overview and Scrutiny Committee, Councillor Bryn Herron, Chair of the Joint Audits and Standards Committee. We also have the Chief Executive present and the Assistant Director of Law and Governance and the Monitoring Officer, Assistant Director of Corporate Resources and Section 151 Officer, and the Assistant Director for Customers, Digital Transformation and Improvement. We have the Corporate Manager Policy, Performance and Insight, and the Acting Corporate Manager for Finance Operations, and me, I'm the Governance Officer. And if I have omitted anybody, please can you let it be known now. Thanks.
I think that's probably it. Thank you, Henriette. Okay. Now, I'll now move on to the agenda. So item 1, apologies for absence. Do we have any?
We have no apologies for absence, Chair. Would you like me to do a roll call?
Yes, please.
Right. So members, can you please make yourself known to me when I say your name? Councillor Clive Arthey. Councillor Arthey, are you here?
Present. Sorry, I thought I'd unmuted, said present, and then muted again, but obviously it got lost. Thank you.
Councillor Barrett.
Present.
Councillor Busby.
Yep, I'm here.
Councillor Davis.
Here.
Councillor Holt.
Yes.
Councillor Veazey.
Here.
Councillor McCraw.
Present.
Councillor Osborne.
Present.
Councillor Ward.
Here.
And Councillor Dawson? Chair, I don't think Councillor Dawson has joined the meeting.
Right. Okay.
I will get a colleague to call her and see how we are faring.
She was in the meeting earlier, so it would be good if we could chase her, please. Thank you very much.
Thanks.
Okay, moving on to item 2, to receive declarations of pecuniary and non-pecuniary interest by members. Are there any to declare from anyone? Nope. Then we'll move on to item 3. Item 3, paper BCA 2134, the minutes of the meeting that we held on the 6th of December. As this is an informal meeting now, the minutes of the meeting held on the 6th of December will be deferred to the next Cabinet meeting for approval. Item 4, to receive... Sorry, did somebody...
Sorry, Chair. I think Councillor Dawson had just joined the meeting.
Yeah, sorry, I can't get it in. I might be intermittent.
Okay. Thanks, Sean. Can you turn your camera off, please?
Sorry.
Thank you. Thanks. Right, great. So that's everyone present. So moving on to item 4, to receive notification of petitions in accordance with the Council's petition scheme.
None received.
Item 5, questions by councillors.
None received.
And item 6, matters referred by the Overview and Scrutiny or Joint Audit and Standards Committees.
There are no matters referred, Chair.
Thank you. Right. So moving on, item 7, forthcoming decisions list. Cabinet members, does anyone have any comments about the forthcoming decisions list? Councillor Osborne.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yeah, CAB 292, which is the rent and service charge policy. It's got in here that it's to go to Cabinet in February. I thought we'd agreed that that would go to Cabinet after the setting of the budget, either March or April.
Just having a look, see where we've got, looking for that on my list. What page is it on?
It doesn't give page numbers on here, not on the one that I've got, so I can't help that, I'm afraid. I don't think we need to discuss it today necessarily, but I think it's a question mark over it of when it actually goes to be discussed. And the other one is the CNL 115. It's the Housing Revenue Account Business Plan. I would hate to step on Councillor Barrett's toes, but I think you'll find that this isn't the Cabinet Member for Housing, but the Cabinet Member for Finance. That needs amending.
For the business plan,
the HRA business plan.
Yeah, that would be under your portfolio, Councillor Osborne.
Sure, really?
Yeah. But we'll get that confirmed offline. Okay,
I'll confirm it with the officer. Thank you.
And there's only one from me, which I think we need to just clarify as well, and that's CAB 330. It references the Mid-Suffolk Sill Expenditure Programme. I don't know if there is a Baber one or whether that's deliberate or whether there isn't a Baber one to be looked at in March, but we'll need to get that clarified as well. Okay. Henriette, you've got your hand up, yeah.
Yes, sorry, Chair, if I may. For CAB 202, we are currently just checking with the Assistant Director for Housing where that needs to be on the forthcoming decisions list. And of course, we'll check who is Cabinet Member, the correct Cabinet Member for the forthcoming decisions list and update accordingly.
Okay, thank you. And can you also check on 330 as to whether there will be a Baber Sill report as well?
Yes, of course, Chair. I've made a note on all of these and I will make sure that we can check that and we get the corrected.
Thank you very much. Right, unless there are no any further comments on the decisions list, if not, we'll move on then to item 8, which is paper BCA 2135, the outcomes framework. So I'll now invite the Cabinet Member for Customers, Digital Transformation and Improvements to introduce this report. Councillor McCraw.
Thank you very much, Chair. I'm going to be just introducing the report as relatively informally as I can because you have the papers in front of you. So good afternoon to members, Happy New Year, and to anybody who might be watching on the internet. The outcomes framework that we have before us. Oh, I should add that we do have the presence of the Assistant Director, Sarah Wilcock, and Dr. Jane Kennedy, who's been one of the lead workers on this particular project. So on any technical matters, they may be better to have questions addressed to them. So this report identifies the need for the outcomes framework. There's a basic principle we've been working on over the last few years in developing our corporate plan, our 6 strategic priorities. We've moved on to our service plans and the personal plans, the policies and the actions that will be taken. This stage is to ensure that that corporate delivery plan is delivering the right activities for our residents and communities. Now, you may remember that Cabinet members contributed to the development of the outcomes at an away day in October, and an updated framework in December was presented, and we're being asked to agree that today, or at least to provide a steer for its agreement. And it's a new approach, it's a slightly different focus. The focus shifts away from measurement and reporting in the old ways, away from highlighting activities, outputs and performance indicators, to emphasising the outcomes, that is, what is actually being done, as opposed to what measures. People can draw different conclusions from measures, and we can then demonstrate the impact of the strategies, policies and plans. Now, the framework operates in a tier system. Tier 1 is the vision of the Council. That's followed by 18 strategic outcome statements, 3 for each strategic priority, and they form Tier 2. The short-term and flexible range of Tier 3 is the intermediate outcomes, and that's going to form the core of the overall outcomes that will form the next stage, Tier 4. The idea is to help us make sure we spend our money on the agreed outcomes for our residents. Now, we already looked at these over some time. We're seeking to drive the strategic change and improvement and providing what we've described in the corporate plans and from the start as the golden thread, strategy and business planning arrangements. It's a new performance management approach and the direction of travel for reporting, embedding a culture of performance, challenge and improvement. Now, here we're asked to agree 3 recommendations, or rather to provide a steer for 3 recommendations. We have to already agree the first 3 tiers, those we've been looking at in the last few months, of the Babergh Outcomes Framework, as what that being the new strategic approach to measuring performance for the Council. Tier 4 will be developed with SLT, the senior leadership team, working with the corporate managers in each of the 6 strategic priorities relating to their particular specific measures, outputs and key performance indicators, which will follow in tandem with the 2022 to 2023 service planning cycle. That will feed into our future quarterly reports on the outcomes framework and the corporate delivery plan. Delegating any minor changes, as we have done in the past, this has been done in terms of minor changes to wording, to the Assistant Director for the Customer Digital Transformation and Improvement portfolio in consultation with the relevant portfolio holder, and this will be paralleled at Mid Suffolk. I should add that Tier 4 is not something that will just be sitting around waiting. It's going to be starting work next month, and the final plans are expected in early May. I'm happy to take any basic questions. Please remember, tiers 1 to 3 are relatively high-level documents, and they can seem very obscure, and they can seem somewhat aspirational. In this instance, we are setting those aspirations, but Tier 4 is where we're eventually going to see the proof of the pudding, because that will be the outcomes, and that's why we have a framework for outcomes. Thank you. Over to you, members.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor McCraw. I'll go through members individually to see if anyone has any questions. Councillor Arthey, any questions from you?
No, thank you very much.
Councillor Barrett, any questions?
Nothing from me, thank you.
Councillor Busby.
I've got a few things in debate, I guess. There's just one point. It's not a question, it's just a consistency on the housing outcome. On 2 of the 3 tiers, we refer to residents, but on Tier 2, our strategic outcomes, we then change that to local people have a say in the future of housing. It's only a small thing, but just consistency.
Again, terminology, and that can be dealt with by the Assistant Director under the 3rd recommendation in terms of you say, consistency of wording.
Yep, exactly, yep. Councillor Davis.
Nothing from me.
Councillor Dawson.
No, thank you.
Councillor Holt.
No.
Councillor Malvisi.
Councillor Busby has addressed the issue that I queried.
Okay, thank you. And Councillor Osborne.
No question from me, Mr. Chairman.
Do any other members of the council present have any questions that they'd like to ask on this report? Please raise your hand if that's the case. Okay, I'll now move into the discussion stage of this. Any cabinet member that wishes to make any comments in the discussion, would you please raise your hand? Did Councillor Busby, did you say you wanted to say a few things under this? Yeah, Councillor Busby.
Yeah, I'm assuming that housing is not just council housing, it's housing of all types. I guess that should have been a question, but I'm assuming that it's of all types. What worries me is when I read through all of the various tiers, the objectives, etc., the outcomes, I think we're going to have a problem with our joint local plan, because I don't think the two are in line, in sync. And bearing in mind that the joint local plan is perhaps the most important plan that we produce, shouldn't it tie in with what we've got in here?
In what way do you think there's a disconnect between the two?
Well, quotes in the outcomes, it's residents have a say, or residents have a say in the future of housing. Housing is sustainable with reducing carbon emissions that are future-proof to meet residents' needs. Communities are attractive, successful and connected places for people to live and work. Community have the capacity and are supported and empowered with the infrastructure to maximise opportunities and thrive. We enjoy value, enhance and protect our environment. And we should improve the link between the corporate plan, strategic priorities, service plans and individual plans so that everyone understands how they contribute to achieving the joint vision. I just think that our joint local plan seems out of date in comparison to what we're suggesting here. I'm not convinced that local people do have a particular say in the future of housing, or that the infrastructure we're offering through the joint local plan is to maximise opportunities and thrive.
Well, certainly our residents and other interested parties have had ample opportunity in the various consultation phases, and also during the examination of the joint local plan to have significant input into it. So I think that.
Well, I think if yes, they might have an opportunity to, and it's maybe semantics, but having the opportunity to have a say and having their views taken on board are different things. I think if you spoke to the residents of Sproughton, Pinewood, Copdock, Bentley, Burgolt, Capel, I'm not convinced that they would think that their views had been taken on board. Just to mention half a dozen.
Can I discuss that in response, John?
Councillor Crawl, yes, please do.
Because I do have some thoughts on the subject. I quite take Councillor Busby's report, or point. It's a good one. Effectively, I mean, when we deal with policy and when we talk about planning, we're very much bound by the fact of the National Planning Policy Framework and overall central government policy. Now, our joint local plan is obliged to conform to that. I don't see any disparity. If I look at page 18 of the report and the outcomes shown there, I think that's tier 2, the strategic outcomes in the light green on the right hand side, as all our residents live in affordable and high quality homes that enable them to build settled, safe and healthy lives. So that's the fundamental overriding point. And you have the 3 pieces underneath that. And some of those, for the first part is, I believe our joint local plan does address, if not all of those and every single action that we'd like. The broad principle is that we are looking for all those things. And I have to say, recalling the JLP, that our policies do conform to those strategic objectives. I can't see any disparity there. The ability to fulfill that is circumscribed by central government policy, and the joint local plan is required to do that. So we know that we have limitations placed upon us. But in this instance, we don't have the limitations. This is what we think, as opposed to what outside central government necessarily thinks. So, yeah, I can see the difficulties, how much say residents should have in the future of housing. And you're correct, it does deal with all forms of housing, both for the private market, affordable housing, and of course our own housing. I hope that answers the question, but I think it's an ongoing issue that we're always going to have with planning policy.
Thank you, Councillor Craw. And
if I just come back.
Yeah, okay.
It's just
Councillor Busby.
one of the items under Tier 3 on housing.
Sorry, apologies for that.
Okay. New homes are in high quality, sustainable environments served by jobs, community facilities, green spaces, and effective transport links.
Yeah.
Really?
And here we are at the aspirational level, not entirely under our control.
But this is a tier that we are going to be measured on the delivery of these things. As I said, I don't think the JLP supports that.
Well, I think
But
it's a
maybe
matter
that's
of
just my
that's a matter of opinion, obviously. But I'm just trying to explain why it is the case that it is. We're dealing with a reality here, but this instance is less to do with what this is a measurement we're setting for ourselves. These are aspirational. What would be interesting, and I think this is where members across the council as well as the cabinet will be able to feed in, is what specifically within the Tier 4 outcomes that we actually ask for. And I think that's where we can shape and address the point that you're making.
Councillor Arthey.
Yeah, partly this is stuff that you've said, but I think it is consistent with the ambitions of the joint local plan. As you've said, that involved significant engagement before the statutory consultation period on the submission document. And I have spoken to Councillor Busby about this before, particularly with regard to Capel. There will be more opportunities to discuss infrastructure requirements with communities wherever that development is going to occur. Of course, we've still got to get the final adopted plan, but I've undertaken with Capel that we will certainly go out there and discuss all of the various infrastructure wishes, if you like, so that's something that's going to happen at some time in the future. So I think it's a little bit unfair to say that hasn't happened yet. These things happen in stages, and when this development is approved, if it is, we will be going into a round of discussions with local communities regarding their infrastructure needs and how to deliver.
Thank you, Councillor Arthey. Councillor Busby, are you satisfied to a certain extent today? I think.
Well, I think my issue is
we all understand the challenges with regard to the joint local plan, but as has been pointed out, the aspirations here in this document are clear, and the joint local plan is doing its level best to meet those aspirations in order to build the right communities and provide the right homes and the supporting infrastructure. So, but it is an ongoing challenge, and one which is still being worked on.
Yeah, I think my issue is primarily with the JLP, not necessarily with this outcome report. So, yeah, I should look forward to see how we can amend the JLP to reflect what we've proposed in here.
Okay, thank you. Does anyone else have any points they wish to say about this report here under this discussion section? If not, I'll just say that it is a lot of work's been put into this. It is a completely new way of measuring our performance, and measuring it on outcomes is going to make it far more relevant and far more easily understood to our residents. So, but it has required a completely different mindset and a rethink of how we do this. Hence the detail that we've got in the report, and the further detail as we get down to level 4 that will come. And I'm very sure that Councillor McCraw will be able to drive that through, so that we do have a performance measuring capability that is very much geared to ensuring we are delivering against our corporate plan. Can I ask
Councillor Ward if it's possible? Because I know we can't have a vote on this. If we were to have a vote, I'd be proposing this paper. But could I ask for, and we're expecting a steer from Cabinet.
That's what I'm coming to, yeah.
Thank you, my apologies. That's all I don't know how we deal with, how do you steer? We can't vote.
No, well, what I'm going to ask is, unless anyone has any significant disagreement, can I assume that we're all in favour of this report and its contents? Councillor Busby.
Well, yes, I am. But just again, one small minor thing on the tier 3, the under housing. Yep. In the boxes on the right, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. On the 7th box down, which is the first in the residents have a say in the future of housing, the sentence is not complete. It just says residents are included in actively participate in how they're. It doesn't say how they're what.
Okay. Right. Well, if Councillor McCraw can make a note of that, and then
tell me the page, please.
Yeah. What page number are we on? Oh, hang on. We're on page 27.
Thank you. Well, the first thing is, of course, that's tier 3, intermediate outcomes. Wording can be changed. That's not a difficulty. That is part of the ongoing process under recommendation 3. Tier 4, though, I think is the more significant one.
Sarah, you've got your hand up.
Afternoon, Councillor Ward. Just to interrupt, I think it might just be a visual display point with that particular comment that Councillor has raised, because I can read that it states residents are included and actively participate in how their areas are evolving and changing. So it might just be a display issue.
Okay. Thanks, Sarah. Right. Okay, then. Given what's been said and nobody has any violent disagreements, based on the discussion that's taken place, I am minded to accept the 3 recommendations at paragraph 3, and we'll take that forward then. And any further minor changes that anyone identifies, obviously, will be delegated to the Assistant Director to make those minor changes in consultation with Councillor McCraw. Okay, everyone. Moving on then, the next item is item 9, paper BCA 2136, fees and charges for 2022 to 23. I'll now invite the Cabinet Member for Finance to introduce the report. Councillor Barrett, please.
Hi. Right, so you've got the report in front of you. Basically, this is a report coming to Council with our revised charges for the up and coming year, for the budget year 2022-23. It's pretty self-explanatory. There's a whole schedule of charges which are there. You've got Appendix A, B, D, E. Considerable number of those charges are set centrally, so we are just adopting the charges set for planning and building control, etc., from central government, and those are there. Other charges where we have our own control have obviously been included and highlighted in yellow on the various reports where the charges have gone up. The point I do need to make clear, there's an omission which has now been in your tabled papers of brown bin charges, has gone up by £2 or 3.6%. and that has been put in the agenda supplement, which you will see, which is additional to the original paperwork. So really, all I would say is that this will obviously be going forward to this will go forward to full council for part of the financial eventually. So really, just that's my presentation. I'm not quite sure what I've got to do now, John, with this non-thing, whatever.
No, okay. I'll thank you, Councillor Barrett. We'll have some questions now from Cabinet members. Firstly, Councillor Arthey, do you have any questions?
I do, yeah. I've got a couple actually. The first one is around is it page 48, and it's statutory charges, and we've got, I think, land charges and electoral roll charges, which are still to be confirmed. And I'm not quite sure why that is. The statutory charges presumably fixed. So what is it that we're waiting for to confirm those?
We're probably waiting for central government to confirm their charges.
Okay. And the second question is about the new fees for pavement licenses, pleasure boats and street trading, where these apparently are fees that we've introduced afresh or that we didn't have before. And I'm just wondering what we did before, because presumably we had people operating on pavements and street trading. So I'm not quite sure what happened before, if these are new.
I have no idea whether we charged or not. If we didn't, they got away with it. And presumably this has come about as a result of us not having a policy. So what page was that on, Clive?
Those are on page 37, that there's new charges. The pavement licenses certainly was something that was introduced during the COVID lockdowns or coming out of lockdown, to enable cafes and bars, restaurants, etc., to be able to have tables on pavements outside.
I think it must be a new thing, because see, mid Suffolk, I don't even have the pleasure boat licensing. I don't think they've got it, so I'm not quite sure. But clearly, that's a charges that came. I'm not. Are they new? I don't think they're new, are they?
Well, it says in the paper that they're new.
Yeah.
New fees added as follows. New fee. It says new fees. It doesn't say new charges, does it? Or new? Is it a new charge, or is it just a new fee? In all fairness, I'm not aware of that. I'd have to find out whether that is a totally new one being brought in.
Have we got anybody on the meeting that can help us with that?
No, we don't have. I don't think. I'm just having a look down.
No, there's no one here. Oh, Catherine's. Catherine's
here.
There, but
yeah. Rebecca or Rebecca, Catherine.
So, afternoon, councillors. I don't know the exact answer. I just asked Rebecca if she knew. I think she just replied to said it's that it's new in the schedule, but not sure if it's entirely new. So we can double check that and let you know.
But Catherine, those pavement licenses were introduced during COVID lockdowns, weren't they?
Yes, they were.
Well, I'm not even sure about that, because there were people operating on the pavements before COVID.
Yeah, I thought they were suspended during COVID lockdown.
No, that £80 was definitely something that we introduced.
We mustn't get confused with the basic. There was a relaxation of the pavements, so businesses could extend their offer in terms of coffee and tables to the pavements without a license, and that was extended during COVID for a number of people. But that wasn't us charging for that. That was just an extension of. I think it came about when businesses were able to serve coffee outside, and they were able to use the pavement to do it, whereas before they hadn't been able to.
Okay, could I just say that I'm looking at page 50, which is the schedule, and there's nothing in there for a previous charge. So it does look as though they are newly introduced.
Well, that's new to me, Clive, because it wasn't on my. It didn't come up as a new charge when I was having a briefing. So we'll have to come back to you on that one.
I think they were there. I mean, if you look at page 10, discretionary charges, there's a whole host of, in theory, new charges, including street trading. Well, we'd certainly charged for street trading before. I just don't think the 21, 22 charges have been shown.
Sorry, Dave, what page was that?
Well, it's page 10 of the report.
Chair.
Yes.
Oh, sorry. I think the Chief Executive want to say something first. I don't know whether he's beating me to say that the licensing was introduced last year, but please go ahead, Chief Exec.
Yeah, yeah. Arthur, yeah, go ahead. Sorry.
Thank you. No, all I was going to say is
I was looking through my documents here to try and find an answer.
I was going to save councillors trying to find answers and certainly trying to stop them from guessing, which I think we're in danger of doing. So as Councillor Barrett has already said, we'll find the answer out and we'll come back to members and we can email around all members to confirm.
Okay, thank you, Arthur. Liz, Councillor Marvisi. Liz, do you have a question? I'll come back. Councillor McCraw, your hand's up as well.
I was going to agree with something Councillor Barrett said about the pavement licences and the relaxations that took place during the lockdown periods to allow businesses to continue. But I noticed these are discretionary charges under caravan licensing and other licensing, presumably. And again, I might be doing what Chief Executive has suggested we shouldn't do, which is guess. But it would seem that we weren't exercising that discretion prior to this year.
That would certainly be the implication. The discretionary charges are those that we can put on services at any time to cover the costs of those providing the service. So
I'd also add, I don't know how many people would be subject to such discretionary charges. That's another matter entirely. But I don't think it's very high. Pleasure boat licenses in mid-Suffolk, for example.
I don't think they even have the schedule of charges in there. I'm pretty certain they didn't.
Well, we have places where pleasure boats might be used and they may not.
Yeah.
There's no pleasure in mid-Suffolk.
We have the rivers. Councillor Holt.
Yeah, I was just going to say, if you look on our website at the moment, you can actually apply for a payment licence, which is £80.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, you can. Thank you. Councillor Osborne.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yeah, page 52, charge for the collection of up to 5 items. Considering the current problems that we have with domestic fly tipping, it may be at some point within a few months that we decide to go with an alternative system and pricing structure. So my question is, if that is the case, will we be able to still go down in that direction if we approve the current charge outlined in the report before us today?
That probably needs to go to the Cabinet Member for Environment rather than me, because that's a policy thing rather than the charges, isn't it?
It is, yeah. So, Councillor Dawson, I don't know if you wanted to quickly answer that question.
Say it again.
This Councillor Osborne has asked whether if we were to make any changes to the bulky waste collection tariff at some point in the future, whether that can still be done irrespective of whether we approve this slight increase in the charge today or not.
Well, my understanding is it can't be till next May, but on the other hand, we've got a proposal we're going to put forward, which I've mentioned to her earlier, that we're going to discuss, which will deal with this problem outside of this. And I think it will be a lot more cost effective for the council. So the problem will be dealt with. So it doesn't really matter whether we can change it or not, because we've got another solution to the issue, which will be better for Babergh.
Yeah, thank you for that.
Sorry, Mr. Chairman, if I can come in on that, that doesn't actually answer my question. I'm asking that if we approve it today, can we change it before we get to the next financial year? I was under the impression that we could, but now it would appear, going by the portfolio holder for the environment, that we cannot.
All we've got here is a current charge for a single charge for bulky item collection. Whether we keep the charge at the current 21-22 rate, or whether we increase it with an inflationary increase of 22-23, it's just for that single charge. That decision would have no impact on any alternative tariff that we may or may not wish to introduce at a later date. We're just looking specifically at an inflationary increase on the current single rate charge for bulky waste collection.
And it's never been changed during the year previously, so there's no reason why it would be going forward.
I don't know if Cass is here, whether she might have.
John, we set the rates for the year, and this has just got a usual, as you quite rightly say, it's got a usual inflationary increase, and that's it.
Yeah,
I'm not sure.
We're not at this stage. We're just looking at the current charges and that we have in place, and looking at the inflationary increase on those current charges. We're not making any assumptions or any decisions about an alternative charging schedule at this stage.
So, I mean, it strikes me that if we decide to introduce a different charging schedule, that can come forward as a recommendation, I would have thought, from the environment portfolio to be voted on at Cabinet and then introduced as a charge into our charge schedule. So I don't think we need to overcomplicate this particularly.
No, I think we're probably making it far too difficult for ourselves. So Arthur, have you got a comment you wish to make on this?
I was just going to agree with that latter comment. Of course, you can set fees and charges. You can change fees and charges. That's up to you at a later point in time in the year if you choose to do so in terms of a different policy approach. That's perfectly possible. I was just going back a step, if I may, because I've had some further confirmation in relation to both the pavement licenses and the pleasure boats. So the reason for the pleasure boats being introduced is because we've had an application for one for the first time ever, or first time in many years rather, and so that has brought it to our attention, and therefore looking to make sure that we can deal with that and recoup the costs of administering that license. And similarly with the pavement licenses, it wouldn't have been in last year's schedule because it didn't exist at that point in time. It did come in mid-year. It was one of the decisions that I made as part of the delegated authority at the time in relation to COVID changes, and exactly as Councillor Barrett referred to earlier, in terms of making provision for recovery so that businesses could have pavement licenses and trade accordingly. That's why you now see it in this year's schedule as a result.
Yeah.
And if I could just add, Catherine and Emily would need to advise if we wanted to change it mid-year via the Cabinet route.
Sorry, say that again, Councillor Dawson.
Catherine or Emily would need to confirm if we can do anything mid-year. I
see. Yeah. Okay.
And then we can via a Cabinet decision.
But that's outside of the scope of this particular report we've got here today. But yeah, thank you for that. Are there any other questions on this report? If not, I have one quick one, and that is on page 95. The comparison in terms of the service charge totals, comparing this year with next year. Presumably, given the tabled paper that we've got for the inflationary rise of £2 on the on the garden waste collection, then the corresponding item on page 95 would have to be updated as well, because there'll be a slight increase in the total income for that service, assuming that what we have on page 95 is excluding that £2 rise.
That's correct. You'd have to increase that, and that would actually be a slight positive again towards the budget contribution of the extra £2 per bin.
Yeah.
So that would be obviously need to be added in, and that will come forward when we obviously do the budget preparation work.
Okay, thank you for that. Now, before I go to questions from other members present, I note that Catherine Steele, you've got your hand up. Did you have something you wish to?
Yes, thank you, Chair. I just wanted to clarify on that last point in terms of the £2. That was the reason why this came to light, that it hadn't been included in the schedule, because we have actually included that £2 increase in the budget proposals for next year, but it was omitted from the schedule. So it is already included in the figures that are in that Appendix B in your report today. But yeah, it was just missing from the schedule, so apologies for that.
Okay, thanks for that, Catherine. That's great. Okay, again, before I go to other members for their questions, I note, Councillor Busby, you put your hand up again. Do you have another question, or is this something for the discussion stage?
Yes. I don't know which one it is. It's just a small thing. Why are we charging pence in these things? Litter bins, £37.13p. Dog bins, £43.49p.
I would think, Dave, that is a historical thing of percentage increases as opposed to monetary increases, which would be the reason for that.
Well, it just seems crazy. I mean, hazardous waste, £48.16, £55.49. Asbestos.
Yes, but then you see, if we
round it up or round it down,
if we round everything up, then we're accused of rounding everything up.
Good.
or rounding it down.
Or rounding down, what would you prefer? Or shall we just be exact and have a percentage increase?
I think we should just round up.
We need to have.
Councillor Busby says we should round everything up.
I think we do need to keep to percentage increases, because then we can demonstrate the rationale behind an increase as a percentage to take into account corresponding percentage increases in the CPI. So I think we need to stick with percentage increases.
All of those were the same as last year, so they've not had an increase.
Well, they would have done at some point.
We don't increase everything doesn't just get increased because it can be increased.
We'll move on now. Councillor Hinton, do you have a question?
Yeah, just a quick one, really. It refers back as well to what you've just been saying about percentage increases. £2 on the on the brown bins is 3.6% according to Councillor Barrett. Is this going to be for a guaranteed number of collections? Because we've already lost 2 collections this last month, and there are several collections during the year that were lost, and yet people were paying extra for them. They were reimbursed on their bill for the bins that weren't collected.
They were, yeah.
Including are people going to be reimbursed for the bins that weren't collected during December then? Because there's been no brown bin collections during December.
When the renewal came through, when they were not collected, there was a credit for the non-collection on the bill.
But that was the previous financial year. We're now talking about a different financial year.
Well, I assume that if it goes through again and we have they will do exactly the same as they did the last time.
So that £2 could be nullified then?
Well, it would be, but then it wouldn't have had a cost because we wouldn't have collected the bin, would we?
I think the principle, Councillor Hinton, is that we reimburse when there are significant miscollections of brown bins, but we have to at this point put in a slight increase in the service charge, because the cost to ourselves is increasing in terms of the collection cost for the brown bins. It is only a minor increase. £2 is very small, and I think as we note every year, the uptake of the brown bin service increases year on year. We have more and more subscribers each year. It is a very popular service, and those that subscribe to it do regard it as excellent value for money, which indeed it is. At only £1.10 a week, whatever, it is very good for what our residents get for it.
It's a lot cheaper than going to the waste tip.
It is.
It comes to your door, just like Deliveroo.
Yeah. Okay. Right.
You don't get a reimbursement if the waste tip is closed, whereas you do if your bin is not collected.
Well, you've still got the money of going there, haven't you? That petrol cost of getting there and then having a closed thing, you've still incurred that cost.
So if there are no further questions, I will open this item up for discussion, Cabinet members. Does any Cabinet member wish to say anything else regarding the fees and charges paper? If so, please raise your hands. I think we've probably covered pretty much everything in the question section, but Councillor Arthey.
Yeah, just to let you know that whilst the rest of you were talking, I sought an answer via the council's website to the street trading and pavement licences, and I found one. So if you're interested, Mid Suffolk has not adopted street trading, so it has no policy and there are no restrictions. Babergh has adopted street trading in the past. And there are a list of restrictions, so it tells you where you can and where you can't trade and what you have to do and what you're not allowed to do. But we haven't charged for licenses in the past, so this is indeed a new charge. So I don't think it's necessary for anybody to go away and find the answer for me. It was actually on Babergh's website.
Yes, and I think the chief exec did state that. When you were looking at that information, Clive?
No, I think actually he was referring to pavements rather than street trading.
Can you tell me the difference?
Two different licenses.
Can you tell me the difference?
Well, yes, because if you want a pavement license to operate outside your premises on the pavement, it's going to cost you £80. If you want a street trading license, it might cost you £2,450.
So that's like a proper vendor's, like burger van type operation, is it?
I don't know all the details, and to be honest with you, I found
it's a difference of like serving a coffee outside your business, isn't it? And then having a full-fledged
completely different thing.
Yeah. To be fair, I was just, I mean, I asked you the question, but I found the answer elsewhere. Thanks.
I'm so pleased you did.
The thing with the pavement licenses, and I will come back to what I said earlier, is that prior to COVID, there wasn't any facility to allow restaurants and other venues to set up tables and chairs outside. This was something that was introduced to help them, and I think it was actually about 18 months ago. It was the summer, July or August 2020 now, to help them with their business recovery. And we introduced a flat fee of £80 for them to be able to do that. And I seem to remember at the time, we also allowed people to set up tables and chairs prior to actually getting the license. So we didn't want the paperwork to hold up anything they wanted to do to help their businesses, so that they could set up tables and chairs and apply for the licenses retrospectively, which I believe a number of businesses did. So anyway, that's a bit of history from my recollection on that. Yeah. Councillor McCraw.
A minor point on the subject of street traders' licences. At one point in years gone by, I recall that we had no such facility, and that it was possible for a burger van or a kebab van to set up within a lay-by, and we had no control over them whatsoever. and yet they were creating a considerable amount of waste in the area, which we had to do some work about clearing up. So there was a cost involved. We had no means of licensing them properly, and we had no means of recovering our costs. So this is entirely proper.
Okay. So are there any other points that any cabinet member wishes to make on this? And if not, again, based on the discussion we've just had, I am minded to accept the recommendations in this report regarding the fees and charges so that we can include the new schedule in next month's budget. So thank you for that, members. We'll now move on to the final item, item 10, paper BCA 2137, environmental, social and governance considerations for the Council's Treasury management investments. Now I'll now invite the Cabinet Member for Finance to introduce the report. Councillor Barrett, please.
Yeah, hi. Right, this came up as a result of a question at overview and scrutiny, where the position of the council's investments was discussed, whether they are to be taken away from carbon generators or non-green or clean investments, and that was discussed at overview and scrutiny. And if I'm correct, and I seem to remember because I sat on there, the general feeling was that yes, the ideal situation would be that the council moves away from what I suppose you could say dirty investments and move to clean green. But it was considered at the time that it should be done in a way which doesn't have a detrimental effect on the investments of the council, and it should be done in a reasonable and sort of a sustainable and fiduciary responsible way. So that was where we are, and I think that's basically the recommendation that is before you at 3.1.
Thank you, Councillor Barrett. Right. Questions from Cabinet members. Councillor Arthey, do you have any questions?
No, thank you, Chairman.
Councillor Busby.
No, thanks.
Councillor Davis. Councillor Dawson, any questions?
No, thank you.
Councillor Holt.
No, thank you.
Councillor Malvisi. Any questions, Liz? Councillor McCraw.
Nothing to add. I would support this.
Councillor Osborne.
No questions, Mr. Chairman. I think it's a very good recommendation and fully support it.
Any other members present? Do you have any questions? If so, please raise your hand. Councillor McLaren.
Okay, bye.
Can I just?
Oh, sorry. Before Mary, before Liz,
yeah, okay.
Liz, you just popped your hand up.
Yes, just to say I have no questions to ask. Because you were going round us all and I missed it.
Sorry, Mary, go ahead.
Thank you, Chair. Chair, can we just clarify for the record with Councillor Barrett, it was joint audit and scrutiny rather than overview and scrutiny?
Yes, sorry, you are correct, Mary. Yes.
Sorry about that.
Yes, no, it was joint. Sorry, I got me committees muddled up. It's actually joint audit and standards that came to.
Yeah.
Yeah, sorry.
Thank you,
which is the appropriate committee for that, actually.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor McCann.
Councillor Horan.
Yes, thank you, Chair. I did put my hand up because I was going to correct Councillor Barrett on his mistake. As chair of the committee, I was a bit offended that he was getting confused, but just some general sort of flesh on the bones, Chair. I think Audit and Standards, the vote was 8-0, including Councillor Barrett. It was a very strong vote. And I think since that meeting in May, I think I feel even stronger about it than before. We did make the issue that we don't want to lose any money. And as chair, I was very strong on that. I wouldn't accept any vote that left us in financial trouble. But I think since then, the way the world is going, we have some investments that are slightly underperforming, one especially. And I think the fact they are invested where they are could be one of the reasons for that. Now, I know that not all the money is invested in dirty fuel, as Simon puts it, but the fact that it is there, I think, does make a difference. I think in future, people will shy away where it's got this taint to it. So I do think we need to be sharp on our feet and look ahead. I think our public won't forgive us if we don't grab this chance while we may. Something that is not doing well now, if it was switched to something that is quite green and sexy and 21st century and futuristic, we may stand a better chance of gaining the loss on a new fund than we do on the existing one. And I think that's the way the committee felt. And I think this should get a clean bill of health and maybe be added to, but we can't afford to miss this chance because our public will not think well of us if we skate around it and don't grant the metal when we can. So thank you for your support, and I look forward to a positive result. And great to attend the Cabinet meeting. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Haran. It's good to see you here.
I mean, I'd just like to point out that I very rarely forget Councillor Haran. He's omnipresent in my mind, but I must admit I do audit and standards and ONS. They tend to be a big blur to me, so I do apologise, Councillor Haran.
That's fine. Apology accepted, Simon. Happy New Year.
Yeah.
Okay, so we've had questions. We'll move into discussion phase. Does any Cabinet member wish to make any comments about this? If so, please raise your hands. Councillor Arthey.
Yeah, I just wanted to really, I think, agree with Councillor Barrett. There's an issue here about how one makes the judgment on what companies, what types of business might have an impact and whether we should be investing or not. And I'm thinking about people like Shell and BP, because it's quite likely that they're actually investing huge amounts in clean energy. They may well be based historically on fossil fuels, but because of the size of that background, if you like, they're better placed to be able to invest these large amounts. It's in their interest to do so that they continue as energy companies, whereas previously they've been fuel companies. And I think it would be completely wrong if we actually said that people shouldn't be we shouldn't be investing in companies like that, because they historically have been, I think Simon called them dirty fuel producers or something. So I'm wholly supportive of this. I mean, it's something that we should constantly monitor, but we shouldn't have any sort of list drawn up by any particular person to say where we should and shouldn't invest because we think they're clean or dirty.
Yeah, I quite agree with that, Councillor Arthey. We're not in the business of demonising certain businesses, certain companies, just because certain pressure groups have got it in their minds that these are companies that must be called out. That, as you say, that they're increasingly becoming energy companies, and indeed they are big, they're rich, they're the only ones who are really going to be able to provide the investment in clean fuels going forward. So and their shareholders will expect that, because they've got, those companies have got to survive. They've got to keep providing dividends to their shareholders. So it's in their interest to adapt, and I'm sure they will. And we need to encourage them to do so.
I mean, you've only got to look at the corporate advertising of companies like BP and Shell that are putting out that their case for, as you say, they're turning from a carbon-based energy supplier to an energy supplier of different types, and clean, and that's where we are. So it seems that really, for us to be, it would be irresponsible to take investments out and then put them into other industries at a cost.
Yeah. The whole purpose of this paper and to look at ESG considerations is to ensure that we're doing the right thing, yes, but it's not to grandstand and make political statements about businesses we do or do not like. It has a far more responsible purpose. I will also like to say that we do tend to focus on the environmental aspect of this when we're looking at these businesses, and we keep talking about green energy particularly. That social and governance considerations must also be taken into account as well. They tend to be lost and swamped by the environmental considerations. But having said that, I think, again, based on the discussion we've had today, the questions we've had today, and I know that the discussions we've had in the past about this, that the steer I've got is that the recommendation at 3.1 is what the cabinet wishes to accept, and therefore I'm minded to go with that, unless anyone now violently disagrees with me, in which case I'll accept that recommendation on behalf of the cabinet. And therefore that brings us to the close of today's informal cabinet meeting. First of this format. It's been forced on us by circumstances. It has felt a bit different from not just meeting face to face, but also from when we've had formal meetings online during COVID lockdown. So hopefully we'll be back to normal and be back to meeting together in Endeavour House next month, where we'll be discussing and debating at that point, debating and voting on the budget papers. So until then, I'd just like to say that the next meeting is scheduled for Monday, 7th of February, 2 p.m. And as I just indicated, fully expect that to be in Endeavour House in the council chamber. But thank you everyone for attending today.